Hey everyone, I am Silas Silver, and you are listening to the Tales of Galatia Explained. In this series, I talk about the historical context and lore surrounding the Tales of Galatia. Today I'll be discussing some of the context surrounding the legend of Mother Death. If you haven't seen my video reciting her legend yet, I recommend you watch that one first. This one should make a lot more sense after you do. I'll link below. So, Mother Death, like a lot of Galatian legends, likely has some truth to it, but shouldn't be trusted completely. There are reasons to believe some parts and to distrust others. Before I get into any of that, though, I wanted to go over just a brief overview of Galatian history, if only so you understand how unfathomably old this story is. Usually, Galatian historians prefer to measure time in years. Imagine that. But for stories this old, we don't actually know how many years it has been. It is so old we don't know how old it is. Civilization has crumbled and been rebuilt and crumbled many times since this story happened. In fact, so many times we don't even know how many times that has happened. We are forced to measure time not in years, but in gods. Sun gods, specifically. Here in Galatia, we have many gods of widely varying degrees of power. However, even children know that at any given time, the most powerful god of all is the sun god. Describing the sun god to someone not from Galatia is a little difficult. To us, it's just how the world is. The fact that in your world the sun is not a being at all, but simply an object, would be pretty alien to a Galatian. For us, the sun god in many ways defines the nature of reality. Their will, their rules, kind of set how things work for the time of their reign. They are pretty aloof, though. The sun gods are so far above even the other gods. They do not take part in the usual struggles and politics of divinity. They almost never answer prayers or give instruction. Worship and blasphemy seem equally irrelevant to them. When they take notice of Galatia at all, they simply exert their will, and it is so. But mostly they seem to leave us to manage our own nonsense. Importantly, each sun god has a distinct color. Some say each sun god actually introduces a new color to the universe, never before seen or known until the dawn of that god's first day. I think that isn't quite true. There are references, for example, to the color of blood before the dawn of the red sun, but most cultures didn't seem to have a special name for that color. And that seems really strange to us now. The color red is so vivid and can evoke strong feelings, but somehow back then, even though people could see it, it wasn't distinct enough to warrant a name, or something. We don't fully understand, but something happens to color when a new sun god arises. We are currently ruled by the sixth sun god, called simply the blue sun, in part because we don't know its name or if it even has one, but also because it is the deepest and truest shade of blue anybody has ever seen. Prior to the blue sun was the green sun. Before that was the gold sun, and then the red sun, and then the dark sun, and the first of them all was the white sun of the eternal dawn. To make a tremendous understatement, sun gods do not abdicate their place lightly. Each sun god reigns for so much time, the mortals usually lose track multiple times of how much time it has been. The only exception was the gold sun, which we know reigned for roughly 10,000 years. Assuming the other sun gods reigned for comparable amounts of time, which is a big assumption, then that makes the story of Mother Death something like 40,000 years old. That's a staggering number. Too big to really comprehend, honestly. But even that doesn't actually convey how old this story is. We today have stories of ancient emperors from the Gold Sun era who built massive stone monuments. The remains of those monuments are almost gone, weathered away, turned to dust. They're so old that they can hardly be found at all. The record I recited was largely translated from an Empyrean tablet contemporary with the ancient emperors and monuments I mentioned. Unspeakably ancient. And yet there's good reason to believe that this story was more ancient to them than they are to us. So this was a legend to the people in our legends. The story of Mother Death predates nearly all known gods, angels, and devils. It's older than the mountains, older than the seas, and much, much older than the sun. To my knowledge, there are only like 3 gods and a handful of Eternals that can even plausibly claim to have first-hand record of those times. It's very, very old. So naturally, it's been told and retold, written and rewritten over and over again. A lot of embellishments, mistakes, and even intentional lies can get introduced along the way with a process like that. It's the sort of thing historians just have to deal with. The version I told has been compiled from several other versions, including the tablet I mentioned, keeping the parts that are most common among all of them, and of course set to verse. A lot of the nonsense can be cut out that way, but there's always going to be some inaccuracy that gets in. That said, there are good reasons to think the story is largely correct. We know there was once a white sun goddess of life, and there isn't anymore. That is pretty much undisputed. We know she was followed by a dark sun god of death. Also, the dark moon Quailum is strong evidence of the death being part of the story. Quailum deserves a story of its own, and do let me know in the comments if you would like to hear about it sooner than later. Briefly though, Quailum is one of Galatia's 3 moons. It is sometimes called the dark moon or the death moon. It is a hollow, metallic, spiny orb that looks more like a skeleton of a moon. It doesn't reflect much light, so it is harder to see than either Oros or Clio, the other 2 moons, despite being closer and larger in the sky than they are. It is actually not really a moon at all, but the indestructible canker steel remains of a city that was once built there. Some unspeakably powerful event somehow destroyed the bedrock and core of the moon, blasting it away and killing the living vivisteel cities that were built there, leaving only the hollow husk, the bone shell of poisonous, impervious metal that is the current day Quailum. I know there's a lot of details here I'm glossing over. It really needs its own video. The point is, with a strong enough telescope, you can actually make out features of the old buildings and roads, sometimes with chunks of rock stuck to them, but mostly just surrounding empty space where the ground ought to be. Quailum is pretty strong evidence that some huge calamity, more destructive and powerful than pretty much anything we can fathom now, happened there. And the story of Mother Death offers a better explanation than most for what could have happened. Another thing that fits the story very well is our understanding of apogee magi. Apogee magi, for those who don't know, are magic users, mages, magi, who practice magic that is directly opposed to the current reigning sun god. So for example, a mage practicing prophecy under the red sun god of chaos, or a white mage performing healing under the black sun god of death would both be considered apogee magi. Apogee magi are quite rare in most time periods because the sun gods are so powerful, performing any magic that opposes the current god's nature is pretty difficult. However, though they are rare, apogee magi are also very powerful. The mightiest magi we know in history are often apogee magi. I've been told it is like trying to train with heavy weights holding you down. Most people might just get crushed, but if you can overcome those weights, you become stronger than someone who didn't have to struggle so hard, or something. Point is, it makes sense that if someone can manage to learn and use necromancy while under the white sun god of life, in a world that by divine edict literally had no death in it at all, that person would be a truly exceptional mage indeed. They would certainly be among the most powerful necromancers ever to walk Galatia. And then, if that same person found themselves suddenly living under the dark sun, who knows what would happen? Their powers might be magnified tenfold again, something ridiculous. There are some scholars who point out the part where Mother Death casts a necromancy spell on the whole world at once and say that is unrealistic. And yeah, there are not many other examples of that amount of power wielded by anyone. Even gods don't channel world-changing power very often, as far as I know. But personally, I think that part lends credibility to the story. The nature of apogee magi wasn't widely known, even in academia, until a few decades ago. Surely there have been people throughout history who understood apogee magi, but it is not like a widely understood thing. To have such a clear apogee mage featured in such an old story, presumably long before most people knew how they worked, makes me think that the world spell was actually not an exaggeration. If anything, the power of that spell might have been toned down a bit in the story to make it seem more believable. And that brings me to the third piece of evidence that supports the story of Mother Death. We believe, based on other accounts, that there was at least one great and powerful necromancer who ruled most of Galatia for between 300 and 500 years after the Black Sun rose. The nature of that necromancer is unclear. Some stories speak about a lord of the dead founding the most ancient families of liches and vampires, commanding armies, and enslaving the living using their blood as nourishment. Others speak of a necro-queen, a giant zombie made of zombies who mindlessly walked the earth in endless hunger, destroying and consuming all life, growing ever larger. These three figures, Mother Death, the necro-queen, and the Lord of Dead, may or may not be the same person. Except for their incredible power over undead, they don't seem especially similar. Perhaps they were contemporaries, perhaps they were one person whose nature changed over time. Perhaps none of them existed and the stories have just exaggerated multiple lesser rulers in different ways. It's all a bit fuzzy. The point is, we do have other accounts and stories from the Age of the Dark Sun. If the story of Mother Death were true verbatim, then we would expect to find, among those stories, additional references to a powerful necromancy ruler, and we do. There are lots of such references. It at least seems very reasonable to me to assume that there was someone of tremendous magical power who at least inspired these stories. And if any mortal could possibly be responsible for the death of the White Sun Goddess, then probably whoever inspired those stories was at least involved and could be even responsible. In short, we can be fairly confident in the most broad strokes of the story. Mother Death probably was a person who existed. There probably was a great calamity that destroyed Coelum and ushered in the endless night. Mother Death was probably involved with it somehow, and probably ruled the world for some time after that. We can say these things with some reasonable confidence, but as for the rest, it kind of depends on what you want to believe. The first part of the story of Mother Death that most Galatians question when they hear this story for the first time is the killing of the goddess. I've mentioned already, sun gods have so much more power than anything else we know or understand. Could a mortal really kill a sun god? Not just a sun god, but the sun goddess of life. Presumably the most unkillable of any being ever. Nobody has ever killed or even injured a sun god since, not even lesser gods. The fact remains that the White Sun Goddess is no longer here, and we believe she did exist, so she must have gone somewhere, which perhaps means she died, and if she died, then something must have killed her. It strains credulity a little that a mortal not only did it, but did it alone, and I cannot stress this enough, by accident. And I know the story goes out of its way to explain the incredible lengths she went to using the entire world and its whole population as a conduit, and it is implied at the end that it was all part of the goddess's plan and she willingly died because she didn't want the Tyrant King to be alone in the afterlife, I guess. So she left everyone else alone instead until we all eventually die as well to join her. The point is, it's just a lot to swallow. To me, though, that's not even the biggest problem. Who knows what is possible when you have endless time? Maybe the amount of power you need to kill some random dude in the Age of the White Sun is also the amount of power you need to kill the Sun Goddess herself. I'm not a mage, I wouldn't know. Maybe Mother Death didn't know how much power she would need, so just literally cast the biggest spell that was conceivably possible. That part at least makes some sense to me. The part that seems the most fishy to me is how the story goes out of its way to paint Mother Death as the victim in all of this. Like she didn't know what was going to happen. She lived her whole life in the court of the most powerful tyrant the world had ever known, and oh, oops, just happened to create a world where she was indisputably in charge instead. Sure. They say history books are written by victors, and she sure seemed like she had a long time where she could have approved some history books, is what I'm saying. The timing of that second epic spell also seemed a bit suspicious to me. The first one took thousands of years of preparation, and the help of the entire population, and all this work and effort. But the second one she just improvised in a day or so, all by herself. Granted, there is the line about her power being amplified by the Dark Sun, which I've admitted would probably be a big deal, so maybe she could cast it by herself because of that. It just also seems plausible to me that perhaps while she was getting ready for her first epic spell, she was working on the second one as well. You know, in case it worked as planned. There's endless nitpicking we can do, but I'm gonna wrap it up with perhaps the most clearly questionable part of the story. After Mother Death dies, we are taken on this journey to the afterlife. It's all very beautiful and touching. And I admit, it brings me to tears. I want it to be true, just like the story says. But one must wonder, how did we get that part of the story? Who is the author here? Because it can't be Mother Death. She's dead. Like true dead, gone forever. In fact, the story specifically says mortals can't know about that afterlife. Yet here we are knowing about it, or at least speculating about it. Of the entire story, that part seems least likely to be based off any evidence or first-hand account to me. Perhaps there was some great seer who peered into the beyond, defying the cloak of darkness willed by the dark sun, just as Mother Death defied the eternal life of the white sun. Perhaps this god-defying seer was able to peer into the secrets beyond the shadow of death and helpfully appended them to a story that they could tell would survive the ages. Perhaps this nameless seer excluded themselves from the story out of humility, and also never made any other prophecies of note, or at least didn't publish them. Or perhaps there was no seer, and some poet thought this ending sounded nicer than ending with, "And she ruled with an iron fist until she went mad and died, the end." Listen, I hope I'm wrong about this. I sincerely hope I'm wrong, and the story is exactly accurate, and I get to that paradise beyond the shadow looking a big fat fool. That would be the optimal outcome. But until I get there, I've got to go where the evidence takes me, and the truth is there's just not that much evidence for this part of the story, despite it being a really, really nice story. And that about does it. That is the context surrounding the legend of Mother Death. Thank you for listening. I want to give a shout out to Midjourney. Thanks to them for all the pretty illustrations. If you think I've earned it, please give me a like. If you want to hear more stories, subscribe and ring the bell. I release them once a week. Next week will be the legend of Earthbreaker Empire. Please let me know in the comments if there's anything you want more details about. I kind of have to gloss over some details or I'll never finish anything, but there's always more to talk about with everything. So ask away if anything piques your curiosity. And until next time, toodles.